Again, about security, you can never talk enough about it, especially when you still have some lives being lost here and there. Well, yes, some seminars, programs are being held, they say, with a view to finding solutions to the entire challenge. But perhaps we'll give it this background and then we'll come over and begin to break it down. Take a look at this report.
Have to leave for us. It's not yet. There is just
this gathering of policy analysts, social and human rights activists and representatives of civil society groups and non-governmental organizations was organized by the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, OSIWA, to look at the challenges and prospects of ensuring security and public safety without sacrificing human rights and dignity. With the prevailing security challenges which have resulted in the loss of human lives and continuing insecurity among communities and citizens, the day's discussion mainly centered on what is expected of the federal government at this time.
Every time I read a statement from a government official, I don't get a sense that they are thoroughly reflecting on these issues and trying to understand the different dynamics at play.
There has to be an appreciation of what is it that actually motivates them. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with them. But you have to understand why are they doing what they are doing. What is it that informs that particular thing? You need to develop, a proper strategy for engagement. You need to disaggregate the franchise called Boko Haram.
The trust deficit between the citizens and government, slow dispensation of justice and the inefficiency of the Nigeria police, which is a primary agency charged with internal security in the country, were also issues of concern for participants.
When it happens in other countries, they blame the terrorists. But when it happens in Nigeria, they blame government. Because there has not been clear articulation of government response to this matter. So I think the first thing that government needs to do is to articulate a response and make the citizens to buy into that response.
The police, if truth be told, lack to a large extent the capacity to detect crime. With sufficient information enough and evidence enough to successfully prosecute the criminals.
These analysts agree that the current security threat in the country today is alarming, but say much can be done if the government breaks these strategies into immediate, short and long term and make efforts to connect with the citizens who they owe the responsibility to not only protect but also guarantee their human rights. Omelo.
Well, Okhai Akhigbe joins us now, a security consultant and analyst. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Well, interesting perspective some of them did put up there, other than the fact that this is a franchise. He says government should also articulate a policy or a plan and let the people buy into it. But all along, there were those who thought that maybe they've got that plan, but now he says, no, there isn't any clear plan. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that we still need to develop a framework, in fact, on different levels for addressing these problems. There are legal issues that we need to address, that was mentioned there. Looking at gathering enough evidence that can be used in court to actually prosecute people. Because we need to start to move towards actually getting people arrested on conspiracy levels rather than getting them arrested or dealt with on the streets. Now, those legal frameworks have to be put in place as well. Security agencies, some of them have to be trained in being able to acquire this evidence such that it's credible in the courtroom.
What about the fact that they also talked about, does it include a strategy to go about this? If they say articulate a plan, because if they have a strategy, are they supposed to let the people know what the strategy is?
Well, I would say there would be some parts of that strategy that could be public, and then there are other parts that would probably operate in the background in terms of rules of engagement and how the various agencies engage these kind of groups on different levels. Because, we're talking about the police here, we're talking about the state security services, and we've actually seen the armed forces playing a role in working to mitigate the risks that these groups pose.
In talking about the strategy that could be made public, one would see that in recent times, the State Security Service in particular is running a campaign currently trying to get people aware of who Boko Haram is and the fact that they're just terrorists who are enemies of everybody. Would you say that that's a strategy enough in trying to fight, the menace called terrorism?
Well, I'd say that's part of a strategy because you do need to keep the public informed. You need to build up the confidence within the public. But at the same time, I would say we need to go steps further. And then in terms of developing a framework again, we might look at, this might be the time, actually, to start to look at community policing that comes closer to the people. I mean, we would really need to look at a framework and ensure that, because there are risks in trying to deploy community policing without actually looking at all the issues and taking them into regard. But I would say that we need to start to work towards a closer working relationship between the public and the security agencies. Now, the thing here is that Boko Haram forms part of a problem that we're dealing with today. But we need to work towards a framework that can deal with any problem that comes, because Boko Haram is not the first problem we've had, and I think it would be probably safe to say it will not be the last. It might come in a different manner, but then, I mean, this is a nation that's developing. We have 250 ethnic groups, and there are issues that we...
So what kind of community policing are you talking about here?
Well, there are two models that we could look at. There's the state police level, and then there's the community level. Now, it would take ages to be able to, work out how this will operate on ground, because there are risks of people hijacking this. There are real risks. There are also real risks of empowering thugs. There has to be a proper vetting system of any individual that will be recruited into this. Now, in the UK, for example, you have sort of volunteer policemen who operate in the community. We can look at that. We can look at people that operate part-time as well.
Okay, there was a complaint there saying something about when anytime she listens, that was a professor speaking, anytime she listens to government officials speaking, she says she doesn't get that they get a sense of the situation. Do you also get that as well?
Well, I do get that sense, yes. I do believe that the government needs to work harder to kind of get the people on board and carry them along. Now, I do also sympathize with the government and security agencies as well, because you're only remembered when you fail. For everyone that's foiled, it doesn't really make that big news story. It's the one that gets through that makes the news. So it's difficult. It's a kind of catch-22 situation for the government. But then there just has to be a whole lot more of an effort to take the people along. The media has a part to play in that as well, so there has to be kind of a closer working relationship between the media and the government and with the public as well.
Well, we've seen some moves by some security operatives away from the last time, which you said that we shouldn't even think that this would just go away with a wave of the hand, and we're getting to see more and more of them. Quite frankly, recently we saw some attempt by some of these people to go into some facilities of the security operatives, and they were stopped in their tracks. Would you now say that is successful, or what kind of percentage would you give to that kind of move by such security operatives, as well as the relative peace we've just witnessed till this moment?
Well, that's a tough question, because terrorism as a field, it's rather complex. It's still being studied. It's considered relatively new, probably in the last 50 years. And you see, the thing with these groups is that they sometimes mutate. It's difficult to predict them. There's a danger of trying to compare two groups. Sometimes I've seen people trying to do an analysis between the insurgency in the Niger Delta and then looking at Boko Haram. That's dangerous. Sometimes some groups apply similar tactics, but doesn't mean they're the same. There's also a danger to believe that a lull in activities shows that a group activities have been curbed. That's very dangerous as well, because what we're dealing with here is something psychological. You had a man who had some type of job, and he left that job to join a group. He's been radicalized, he's extreme, and he's ready to go out, blow people up, blow himself up if the case, if it warrants that. So there are no absolutes, I would say. I think that the State Security Service is doing a great job, because I think for me, in the history of this country, people can actually now see the role of State Security Service. Before, they're probably considered a shadowy group that nobody really knew what they did. But now we see that they have the capability of actually disrupting attacks. We've seen they've been able to uncover, secret bomb factories. They've been actually able to make arrests. So I think in the coming months and, well, probably years, that will help to develop the public's confidence in this agency.
Can we say we've learned anything from the military team? Because truly we've also seen them do such. What can we learn? Because now we're getting to see them in communities, keep watch, and there's also been some kind of relative, should I say, success through some discoveries of some bomb-making factories and other arms and ammunitions recovered by this same team.
Yeah, I think it's a plus for the military as well, because I would say again that, in the last dispensation, that's during the military era, people just sometimes didn't really understand what the function of the military was. People ask questions, well, we're not fighting any wars, so what's really the function of the military? But now we're seeing that the military is able to actually support some of the other security agencies in joint operations. We're seeing cooperations that we haven't actually seen before. The military working in cooperation with State Security Service. And I think that's great. It also does a lot for public confidence. We've seen its role in JOS. I mean, JOS is not really held down by the activities of Boko Haram per se. There are other issues of extreme political violence, but then we've seen the military playing a serious role there. And let's not forget, the JTF in Niger Delta is still in place. It's still very active, and there are still
another security concern.
There are still issues in the Niger Delta that we just need to keep our eyes on the ball. We just cannot afford to forget that that is an area that is still very volatile, so we need to ensure that we just keep it in focus.
But we thought, sorry, Chamberlain, we actually thought with the amnesty program in place and we saw all those surrendering of huge cache of arms and ammunition, we thought the war there or any kind of insurrection would be a thing that we would never give a thought to.
Well, that's an easy assumption, but then it's a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, anytime you're dealing with issues that relate to politics, don't forget there are some groups that are excluded from the amnesty program. So the question would be, what are their thoughts now? Would they want to try and create themselves into another group? Would they also want to start to try and get the same leverage? So that's what I'm saying, that we need to just keep our eyes on the situation in the Niger Delta. And then again, I actually think that, in terms of providing resources and infrastructure, training, we just need to expand that in that area to ensure that people are trained and they're able to hold a job. They have something that they can offer. Because, if you look at the reasons why people get recruited, most of these issues are socio-economic anyway. So somebody doesn't have a job, it makes him a likely target for any extremist group.
And unfortunately now we're here where Borno State Governor says corruption and neglect by past administration is part of the reason why this is here in the first instance. And sadly, but then even the government, currently, governors up north, this is a call to duty for them. They really need to step up and be counted. Do you think they've done, well, maybe close to what can be described as appreciable impact in this whole fight?
Well, I think it's a tough call for them because there are certainly a lot of socio-economic issues. I've lived as more or less raised in the north, so I understand it's a little bit more than some people. So definitely there just has to be a lot more initiative on part of the federal government as well as the state government, because like the last speaker, Tunji Bello, was saying, you're talking about Lagos and saying, we just don't want Lagos more or less to be the weakest link. It's the same thing up north. If we let people, if there's an influx of militants or terrorists or insurgents, call them what you want to call them, through the north, it affects everybody. So we're all involved, But I think there's one other important point that needs to be made, and that's a legal point. We need to get to that point where people understand that inciting other people is a crime. So it's not an excuse. I can't say because I don't have a job and then I go into the market and steal. I'll be arrested and taken to court. So we just have to ensure that people understand the implications of their actions as well.